Networking and marketing made simple is for you, the business owner who has a product, a service, or a message that you believe in. My name is Scott Aaron, and each week we'll take a behind-the-scenes look into the real-world marketing and networking tactics and strategies for getting what you have in front of you to a lot more people. Thanks for spending time with me, and now let's get started. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Networking and Marketing Made Simple. Super excited for today's episode. Obviously, it's another interview, which I know all of you love. And, I love how, 6 degrees of separation works. A mutual friend of myself and my guest today, Josh Tapp, who was on this podcast. You guys may remember him. I was on his podcast. Always is very kind and generous in doing introductions with people that he meets along his journey in entrepreneurship. And he ended up reconnecting with one of his buddies from high school who was getting into the podcasting game and made the connection and said, you know what, you guys, have some similar backgrounds in the sense of entrepreneurship and podcasting. And you guys could be obviously doing some stuff together, whether it's a podcast swap or some sort of collaboration, and hopped on an initial call, and here we are. And I had the great honor and pleasure of being on Conrad's podcast, and he's with us today. So Conrad Schneider, welcome to today's episode. And for those that are not familiar with Conrad, he has a brand new podcast is out that's called Leaders Worth Following. And again, I will link my episode that I was on in the description of this. You guys can check it out, and please go subscribe to his podcast, write him a review. It's going to be a game changer, and was obviously honored to be a part of it. So with all that behind us, Conrad, welcome to today's episode.
Thank you, Scott. So happy to be here, and the honor's mine, man, to be on your podcast and to have you on mine. I'm honored. Thank you.
I appreciate that. And so obviously you're new to the podcasting game, and obviously entrepreneurship in a couple different fashions. Mm-hmm. For my audience that is not familiar with you and the podcast that you now have, tell the audience a little bit about it, but also what was that catalytic spark for you that had you say, you know what, I want to get into podcasting. I want to go down this entrepreneurial endeavor. I want to pour value into the listeners, and I want to create a revenue stream that is built around empowering and encouraging others to, be their best.
Yeah. Whew. Lots to unpack there. So I'll I'll be as concise as I can while still hitting your questions there. Just to give an idea of kind of where I came from. Got a degree in business and supply chain analytics, right? And right out of college, went and worked for a health and wellness company as a supply chain analyst. And I enjoyed the work itself. I mean, I enjoy work that involves a lot of moving pieces, and this involved a lot of interpersonal relationships, which I enjoyed, and a lot of them international as well. And I really enjoyed that. And so I worked there for about 3 years, and then moved over to another company where I was working as a client success manager or a customer success manager, and again working very closely with people, but this time in the SaaS space, the software as a service space. We actually worked with career fire departments in California, and again, some of the best guys I'll meet are some of those heroes, man. It was funny. I'd have like a call booked with them, and they would sometimes miss it. And then they'd be like, "Hey man, I'm really sorry that I missed your call. We got a call for a structure fire or something." And I'm like, "Don't apologize to me for that." I'm some nerd that's coming to get your consult you about the software, and you're off saving lives. So it's like, no need to apologize for that. You guys are heroes. Anyway, all of that being said, the way that I got into the podcasting space was, like I said, or like you mentioned, Scott, Josh and I were friends from high school. We both went and served a mission for the church that we're in. After high school, both went to college. We actually had some courses together in college. And then we reconnected recently when Josh approached me and said, hey, you know, I mean, it was almost as simple as just saying, you've got some awesome experience and interesting experiences business-wise. Would you be interested in starting a podcast? Because Josh has, you know, he's got his hands in a lot of different places. And one of those is helping people to launch, monetize, and scale their podcast. Right. And so he approached me and said, you know, I know you've got these experiences. Do you have a story to tell? And the one that immediately came to mind for me, and which sparked the topic for my podcast, was all of us, including myself. And I only say this to explain why I'm started the podcast I did. All of us, including myself, have worked for somebody, had a supervisor, a manager, a boss, somebody who led from a point of power and prestige, or really, you know, protecting their own skins and et cetera, right? I don't need to go too into detail on that. You know, those kind of people. And then on the flip side, I know so many leaders who people want to follow. There's something about them that makes people gravitate towards them. You know, cue Scott Aaron. You're one of the people that, you know, that's why I had you as one of my first guests on my podcast. But it's those people I want to get in their minds. I want to look into them and say, okay, we've got this side of leadership that people are like, oh, I cannot stand so-and-so. And then you've got this other side of leadership that people are asking to follow you. And your network and I mean, naturally your wealth, it just grows because people are dying to be with you. And it's those kind of people I want to get in, and we're hearing their story and we're understanding the principles underneath their leadership. And it's amazing because, you know, doing these interviews, nobody learns more than I do. I'll be honest, because every time I'm talking to somebody, to you or to some of the other guests I've had, it's just a wealth of knowledge, and it just flows. And it's for me and for anybody that listens to it, I can't emphasize how valuable it is. You know, the wisdom gleaned from those interviews for me is fantastic, but something that I really feel like people who listen, you know, if they're listening intently and they seriously take those principles and apply them, you will be an effective leader. Like, you really will be somebody that people want to follow.
Well, there's two things that come up. One, your network is always in direct correlation to your net worth. So if you want to increase your net worth, increase the health of your network. You know, I don't believe it's, you know, people use the saying, you know, you're the sum of the 5 people that you spend your most time with. And if you're someone that spends a lot of time with family or your significant other, I don't think that counts. Like those, you know, family and friends, my wife, our son, they mean the world to me. And they're the people that I spend a lot of time with.
Absolutely.
I would say it's more of that network that you have. It's not the 5 people. It's the cumulative network that you have that allows you to grow and prosper.
Yeah.
The other thing is that the teacher is always the student. And this is something that I really believe. And, you know, we learn from each other. We understand, and then are able to apply things that we take from a book that we've read, or a podcast that we listen to, or even a conversation that we had with someone. And, you know, true leaders are the ones that want to continue to grow, and they want to continue to move themselves forward. They want to learn new things. They want to try new things. And I always mention to people, if you're going to be working with someone, whether it's you're hiring a coach or a mentor or something of that nature, a mastermind, and the people that are running that mastermind or are going to be coaching you are not getting mentored or coaching with someone else and learning from someone else, it's not a good sign.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is when someone puts themselves into a category where they feel they know everything at that point, they're good. They actually know nothing. And that's not someone that I want to learn. You know, my wife and I are in a high level mastermind. We have our own mastermind, and I'm learning from someone that is way, way ahead of us, because again, we want to be able to take that information and then start inspiring and teaching others. So it's important to constantly learn and grow as a leader. Leadership is a job and a position that's never done. It's ongoing. There's always ways to increase one's leadership. So with the various backgrounds and things that you've done in your career that's leading up to this point, what would you say was the most impactful lesson that you learned in working for someone else and in having to, I don't want to say fulfill the dreams of the owner of that company, but compared to now, being in that place and space where you're living out your own dreams, you're building out your own business, as opposed to working for someone else. What was the biggest lesson that you learned working for someone else that has allowed you to then apply it to what you want your own business to look like?
Oh yeah. I would say that's a good question. That's such a good question. There are a couple things that come to mind. Okay, so the first one would be, okay, honestly, they're both equally valuable. So the first one that comes to mind for me is grit and hard work, right? Because I mean, most of us, and honestly, a lot of the people listening to my podcast, and I'm sure to your podcast, we work for somebody else. And it's not really a bad thing. But I noticed that to be successful anywhere, this applies in the corporate world, this is going to apply in the entrepreneurial world. You just have to work hard. There is no substitute for working hard. And my grandma June, rest in peace, she used to say, my dad used to tell me, he used to say, Grandma June would say that when you have something you don't want to do, put on music you like, put your head down and get to work. And man, that could not be more true. I've noticed that if there's tedious tasks, I list them out and I just start going. Take number one, do it. Take number two, do it. And before you know it, I mean, you're hyper productive. You're getting things done in your workday that can take people several days to do. Right. So I think that was lesson number one that I took into this, is just go to work. Right. And you'll be successful. Number two was, and again, bringing it back here, is that aspect of leadership. Right. And I've worked and been mentored and worked for so many different types of people, that I've seen things that I don't want to be, and I've seen things that I absolutely do want to be. And I know that, as I'm growing and getting my hands in different things, I'm sure I'll have people that end up working for me. And when that time comes, I'm going to echo what you just said, Scott. I want to avoid the arrival effect, right? Where I have made it, I've arrived at something, and I can't stop learning. If I stop learning and stop being, stop striving to be humble, then I'll become what I don't want to be. So I guess it's those two biggest things, is that hard work, that grit, but also striving to be the leader that I know people can follow without a second thought.
So, it's interesting because the journey in entrepreneurship is different for every person. My story, mine started when I was 18, kind of thrusted into it, and it's transcended into a 25-year now career. Multiple businesses, and other people kind of stumble into it. And I love this quote by Judge Judy. And she says, if you didn't make it in your 30s, you can make it in your 40s. If you didn't make it in your 40s, you can make it in your 50s. If you didn't make it in your 50s, you can make it in your 60s. There's no real timetable on, quote unquote, when we make it. We make it when we're going to make it. And the other thing I want to ask you is, there are so many different things that people can do in entrepreneurship. So they can start their own brick and mortar business. They can create an online course. They can create a mastermind. They can start a Shopify store. You chose the route of starting a podcast to monetize, to then build other things. And it actually coincides with a book that we had our mastermind read in the month of May. And that book was The Common Path to Uncommon Success by John Lee Dumas. And so the story, of John, he does a daily podcast, and he's had it since 2012. Makes multiple seven figures a year. And it started with, he had a various background. He was in finance. He was in the armed forces. He did a multitude of different things, real estate, and it led him to wanting to start a podcast, and that led to a mastermind and courses and
Yeah.
books. What was it about the idea of starting a podcast that had you say, you know what, that's what I want the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey to begin with, and I want to start a podcast, and I want to grow everything from there?
Yeah. Boy, another good question. These are things like I know, but you never actually ask yourself these questions. Or at least I haven't. But why the podcast? And I'm going to be totally transparent here, right? Working full time, because right off the bat, a podcast is not, it doesn't bring in income, right? There's ways of monetizing and scaling it rather quickly, but right off the bat, it's not profitable. But the one thing I did notice, and this is one of two reasons, one thing I did notice is that I can do this on the side and immediately begin learning from people and immediately begin building this podcast while I'm still working my full-time job to support my family, right? And in my opinion, doing something with like, okay, I could see this generating income down the road, but this is going to be an investment. Personally, I think that's a, I'm not saying I'm not touting myself as wise, but what I'm saying is that it's a wise move, right? To say, I know this will generate income. I don't need to go and quit my full-time job and go start selling something, or you can, but right. You said there's so many avenues. You can do that. For me, it was, and again, being transparent here, it was matching the risk preferences of those closest to me, namely my wife, right? We have a special needs child, and we really rely on a pretty steady income to make sure that we can support him and my other son. And so this was one of the best options. It's like, I can get on it, immediately start learning from people and building my network, and also have this investment where it will generate income. But right now it's growing, right? The other reason for a podcast is because I love meeting people. I love talking to people, and just like we did with you and other guests that we've had on my show, the wealth of knowledge. I'll be honest. When I started it, I had an idea that I would learn things. And again, back to my buddy Josh, which if you've not seen Josh's podcast, The Lucky Titan, please go check it out. He told me in the beginning, he's like, you're going to learn so much, and the people you meet and the network you create, the friendships and the connections that you make, you have no idea. And he was right. I had no idea, because, back to your question, why the podcast? Well, I started it because I love talking to people, and I love hearing their stories and gleaning nuggets of wisdom from them. I had no idea what it was going to be like, and talking to people like you, Scott, and to other people I've had on. And it's just, man, it almost to the point of making me like, emotional. I'm like, I'm so grateful that I started doing this, because I've already learned just so much. It just fires me up. It's so, I don't know, if you love talking to people, and really talking to them, right? It's not scripted. Frankly, it's not at all. It's a conversation where you're learning from them. If you're willing to learn from people, a podcast is the way to go. It is the way to go.
Yeah. The one thing I tell people, I remind them, you don't have to be Joe Rogan. You don't have to be Tim Ferriss.
Yeah.
You don't have to be any of those top podcasters, right?
Right.
But what I love about podcasting, to piggyback off of the things that you said, now I'm approaching 400 episodes in under 4 years, 2 episodes a week, since 2018.
Yeah.
I interviewed, over 150 people. You learn a lot. You don't, everyone thinks that you have to read books to educate yourself. Everyone thinks that they have to go to seminars and conferences to educate themselves.
Yeah.
Or listen to podcasts to educate themselves.
Yeah.
One of the best ways to learn is to have conversations with other people. And that's what, that's why I love Tim Ferriss's one book called The Tribe of Titans. And it was basically a collection of conversations that he had with 400 or 500 people. And he asked them the same questions, but you learn so much from asking questions. Something that I always remind my audience is that questions lead to answers. So if you want to know something about someone, you just got to ask them. The other thing that I love about podcasting is that it really puts you into an authoritative figure type of role, because as you now know, it's not as difficult as it seems to start a podcast. When you think about starting a podcast and you start thinking about all the things that you need to do, you got to get a mic, you got to get a camera, you need a backdrop, and you need software. And it then gets overwhelming. You're like, yep, nope, not for me. Can't do it.
Yeah.
I started my podcast on my phone. I downloaded an app called Anchor, which is now owned by Spotify. And I was literally interviewing people from my phone with just my headset, and that was it. And I was uploading and typing everything up from my phone. And then obviously, there's a desktop version that I switched over to, and that cost me $0. The microphone that I use, that people always compliment me on how clear it sounds, is a Moono from Amazon that was $35. And so everyone thinks that it's difficult to do, but I love the avenue of using a podcast, not only to get self-educated, but to learn from other people and to build connection and rapport and trust. And, one of the best ways to grow one's network is to do it through the means of connecting with other people that have networks, and so on and so on. So the leaders worth following as a name, obviously it's a great name, because again, you want people to obviously follow a podcast and engage in a podcast.
Yeah.
How did you come up with that name? I've had 3 different names to my podcast, and landed on this one about a year and a half ago, and it's kind of stuck. But so what was it about the leaders worth following name that, the idea in your head, you're like, that's what I want my podcast to be called? How did that come about?
Yeah. I'm going to be honest. It wasn't anything magic, right? I mean, it was like, I sat down and, when Josh mentioned, hey, you've got a story to tell, you've got these experiences, what are you passionate about? And then it was just kind of a sit back, and I guess it happened over the space of about a week, where I really pondered and just took time to stop and think, like, I am passionate about a lot of things within business, leadership, Star Wars. That was just kidding, but I really am passionate about Star Wars. But
you and me both, dude. Obi-Wan Kenobi's out. I cannot wait to binge.
Don't say anything yet.
Yeah.
I haven't.
I haven't seen it. It was funny.
Okay.
At the time that we're recording this, it's pre-Memorial Day, and I don't know if you saw the tweet from Disney, but they surprisingly dropped it at 3:00 in the morning this past morning. So the first 2 episodes are available, but it's movie night tonight in our house.
Oh,
so we'll watch it tonight. Yeah.
Oh, it totally is. Yeah. My wife was like, you can watch it, but you have to rewatch it with me. Like, no problem. Anyway, so I was pondering about what I was passionate about, and the whole leadership thing came to mind, and of course you do need a name when you start it. And in the end, it was just kind of, I sat back and I actually went through a couple iterations. And I don't even remember what the other ones were, to be honest. But when it came down to it, I thought, what matters? Like when you think of a leader, what kind of leaders do you want to follow? Right. And then I was like, leaders I want to follow. That doesn't sound like that could be a title, I guess. But then I thought, there are people that are worth following, and because everybody's trying to lead. There's an endless supply of voices and white noise and people saying, no, 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 I have the answer, come this way, or no, 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 come here, come follow me. And the people that are worth following are those that really understand the principles behind leadership and behind making connections, real connections, right? I interviewed a guy, Frank Agan, who a lot of people are familiar with, just a phenomenal guy. And one of the things that he really emphasized and that really stuck with me was how a truly great leader will give without thought of reward. They'll lift without thought of reward. And I'm like, man, if you could sum up like the mission of my podcast in one sentence, that was it. So when it came down to it, yeah, the name Leaders Worth Following summed it up for me, because these are people not only that you want to follow, it is worth your time to follow these people.
Yeah, leadership is a title that is given to you. You don't self-appoint yourself as a leader.
Yeah.
When people start looking up to you and they're positively influenced by you,
yeah,
you're considered a leader. And
well, and I'm sorry, but people who do self-appoint it,
yeah,
double check yourself before you start following what they're doing.
Exactly. And that's the thing, something that I teach everyone that I work with, but I can completely resonate with what Frank said. When you start doing things without expecting anything back in return, you give and give and give and give. And, the universe gives back to you what you put out there. You'll receive at some point, but do things without any preconceived expectation of getting something back. You want to give and give and give. You have to earn the know, like, and trust. You have to earn that respect from the people that you're looking to influence and help move the needle forward in their business in a positive way.
Yeah. Well,
so obviously, the podcast, has recently launched. As we start to wind down, what would you say is the biggest obstacle or lesson that you learned from going through the process of stepping into entrepreneurship, but more so, starting and launching your own podcast? What's really helped you the most through this journey?
Cool. Okay. Again, I keep doing this in twos, but two main things come to mind, right? Number one is just start. Okay. And this harkens back to something you actually said earlier, Scott, which it's like, you think about the mic and the good camera and the backdrop. You don't need that yet. You can get it. It's great, but just start moving, right? People tend to close themselves in a lot of different ways with meeting people and for business opportunities and income opportunities, because they say, this is how it's been. This is how you make money down this narrow channel. But that's not the case. That is not the reality. There's almost, you start into something, you start moving forward. And it's like with meeting people and business opportunities and income, it just suddenly your eyes are opened and you see there's an endless stream for all of these things. There's an endless number of streams rather for all of these things. So number one would be, I've learned just start doing something, start moving. You learn along the way, you learn and grow, and then it evolves, and then you're successful. You're the prime example of that, Scott, because your story is phenomenal. And anybody that's listening to this that hasn't heard Scott's story, you've got Scott's story. I don't know. I was buzzing in my head for days after we talked. Lesson number two is get a mentor, right? So there are people, there's always somebody who is more experienced than I am. There will always be, right? And then most of us get a mentor and follow them, mentors, follow them, right? Learn from the people around you, because they're going to help you jump over these pitfalls that are not necessary for you to fall into, if you will stop and listen to what they're saying.
Love that. Yeah. And I love things in twos and threes. It's digestible and it's easy to then consume and then learn and apply. Before I get to my final question, obviously would love to help promote the Leaders Worth Following podcast. Where can people listen to it? And more importantly, how can they connect with you outside of the podcast if they want to learn more about you and how you're going to be helping people?
Yeah, for sure. It's published on iTunes and Spotify. You can just find it Leaders Worth Following. or I mean, you can search my name too, because I'm listed as the host on it. If you want to connect with me, you can totally find me on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to make connections, and you can even message me directly. I'm more than happy to have a conversation with you. And if you're interested in coming on my show too, yeah, let me know, because I'm looking for those leaders that are worth following. So yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn and find my podcast on iTunes and Spotify.
Awesome. And the links to go subscribe to Conrad's podcast on Spotify and iTunes will be in the description of the episode. So you're not going to have to go too far, and definitely subscribe and follow his podcast. Obviously, I'm biased because I was on there, but I would definitely go listen to that episode. It was a great conversation, but all the other amazing leaders that he's going to have on that podcast in the future, and the seasons to come. So Conrad, final question before we sign off. What does success truly mean to you?
Oh man. What does success truly mean to me? Success is, to me, being happy and providing for the basic things in life. I'm gonna pitch what I truly believe is the definition of happiness, and that is being with the ones you love. Right? You can make millions and billions of dollars, but if you don't foster the relationships with those closest to you, you have not succeeded, right? I think at the end of the day, make time for those people in your life that truly matter. For me, that's my wife and my boys, and I've succeeded if I can provide for their needs and still spend time with them and give them my best. That will make me successful.
Yeah, life and success kind of go hand in hand, and they're meant to be spent and experienced with other people.
Yeah.
That person that's making all the money, they may be successful, but they may be lonely and miserable. So,
absolutely.
And it's not about the matter of money that you make. Success is a feeling, and I could not agree more. And Conrad, I just wanted to thank you again for being my guest on today's podcast. Wealth of knowledge. Can't wait to watch your journey and to see your podcast grow and prosper and flourish. And again, I encourage everyone to go over to iTunes and Spotify and subscribe so you can check it out. And thank you again so much for being here.
Thank you, Scott. Honor's mine. Thank you.
Well, everyone, as always, head over to iTunes and Spotify for this podcast. Please do subscribe, leave a review or something that you would like to see more of, and some feedback. Always looking to better this podcast, even though we're almost 4 years in. Practice makes practice. So anything that I can do to serve this audience better, please do let me know. So everyone, please enjoy the rest of your days, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much again for checking out today's episode. And if you are listening through iTunes, Spotify, wherever you are, please leave me a rating and review. Let me know what you loved, what you would like to see improved, or ideas you have for future episodes. And if you are interested in taking your business to the next level, don't hesitate to go to my website, www.scottaaron.net, where you can schedule a free discovery call with me, where I can learn more about you, your business, what you're struggling with, and how we can work together. And don't forget to check out my wife, Nancy, and mine, our free community on Facebook called LinkedIn Leads for Life. We would love to see you in there. Have a great rest of your day. And thank you, everyone, for your support. Grateful for each and every one of you.